that's how it is. I gotta say, it is just so hot. Like these booths are great. I don't know if you can see this already. Thank you.
Oh,
Yeah. Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the news. Apologize for the confusion with last week's or last 2 weeks ago. This is gonna be April 23rd until present day, which is currently Sunday, May 12th, and a lot happened. So, I mean, we can try to keep this tight, but I'm sure we both have a lot of things to say. Uh, Starting out on a good note, though, did you hear about the guy that bit it? The American dude that went out to the dump? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yes, yes. That was even here, I believe, in some Canadian news. So that was interesting to think to discover that Americans also go to fight for like uh for the western part of Russian occupied territories.
For the ideals of communism and you know, anti-Biden and anti-George Soros and anti-whomever. I mean, this guy screams that if you just look at his face, to me at least.
Screamed.
Very true. So, what happened to this guy is 10 years ago, actually, we're coming up on the anniversary. This is one of the people that decided that, I mean, he was probably using the same narratives, right? Like NATO is a global, world dominating George Soros, Rothschild, socialist backed, globalist backed power. The beleaguered free people of the Donetsk, he was in Donetsk, right? The Donetsk People's Republic require the intervention of actual patriots and freedom fighters. So this guy basically goes out to fight in the swamp of occupied DNR, LNR, which is the Donetsk People's Republic and Luhansk People's Republic, which, and Artem can certainly speak to this more, but used to be probably one of the most resource-rich regions in Ukraine. Now a mafia wasteland where local warlords are scrapping for whatever hasn't already been, stolen. Because they stole everything that wasn't bolted down, and then they stole everything that was bolted down, and they started gangland style assassinations of other people. Who was that guy in 2018 that got blown up by a chair bomb in a cafe? Do you remember? Who was the leader? Was that
Oh,
DR? Was that Donetsk or was that Luhansk?
Donetsk, and his surname was Zaharchenko, if I'm not
Todd.
mistaken.
Yes. Yeah. So this is the kind of reality you're looking at here. This is like a very post communist mafia warlord state. And this guy decided to go fight for that. He gets a Ukrainian wife. Please note we say Ukrainian wife. Uh, so wherever she's at, or was at, rather, in terms of her opinions on the Ukrainian state at the time, she's very much singing a different tune now, because now she's doing everything she can to get justice for her American husband, who they tortured him and beat him to death after he was out fighting, and then they got an artillery or some kind of strike called in on the position of the unit he was fighting in. They accused him of being a spy. He died a miserable death in a basement. So when it comes to fucking around and finding out, he has fucked around. He has found out. And kind of to people that would say, no, they wouldn't do that to their own people. Why would you kill the Americans? Well, number one, they don't care about anybody. They equally do not care about anybody except themselves. And even the Russians have an inferiority complex where they also hate themselves. But that's a different, I think, topic for a different episode. So Artem, I did add the little meme here for people that are listening. There's a motivational speech that came out recently of this dude on the Russian side, just like in verbatim. And if people that can see the screen, you can read it. But the people that are listening to this, he just goes to a group of newly enlisted recruits and he says, you know what? All of you are going to die. Make no mistake. Like, you're all dead. You're all dead men. But Mother Russia will remember your sacrifice forever. And that is how they treat each other at every level. That's why they're shooting each other in the back. They have different units specialized to shoot people in the back who retreat, just like Stalin did. Send people in to the meat grinder, which, read about that. But in terms of news, this guy has thoroughly found out. Anything to add?
Yeah, yeah. Probably I'd like to say that there is no surprise that American citizen got into big trouble with inner intelligent forces of the terrorist organizations, and not because he did something wrong, because people that occupy some particular and high positions in their hierarchy, they are also like highly incompetent. So they must to they must make up some like reasons to prove their efficiency,
Mm.
and the most obvious one would be a person who possesses the American citizenship,
Yeah. Yeah.
regardless of his like actual like crimes or like whatever he did. Like it has nothing to do with the events that happened to him.
So it's either them trying to show that they're not absolutely incompetent, which they still are, or them just using this guy as a scapegoat for what was
Well, you
probably.
know this narrative when like managers and big corporations, they like bring to boards their work for because their like bonuses depends on them. So the same goes for the terrorists as well. They need to prove their efficiency somehow.
Yeah. But Russians and like Russian taught troops are also notorious for having terrible operational security as well, which is if you listener of the podcast, if you Google anything today, you can Google like Russian soldier selfies and you can see dozens, if not hundreds of examples around the internet of Russian soldiers that'll take geolocated selfies next to or within active war zones. And it's just a dream for people using HIMARS and artillery and things like that. So it's an engine of their own creation. But yeah, next slide.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, this is a happier slide in some ways. Um, it's kind of smacks of marketing, smacks of people need good news. But I mean, it's actually an impressive story. Both of them, I think. First one being, this 98-year-old woman who also lived in Donetsk her whole life. And when I say she's 98, I mean she's 98. If you watch the interview, she compares the current war to World War II, which she said, she's like, I lived through that. I lived through this shit too. And then she says that the current conflict is worse. And she just got sick of it. Um, so she just up and left at 98 years old across the artillery explosions and the minefields and you name it. And she made it about 10 kilometers and then she got picked up by the Ukrainians. And she's like, yeah, I just don't want to, I don't want to end my life under Russian occupation. So absolute badass move. I think a big Ukrainian bank called Monobank bought her like a very small house or something like that so that she could live. Did you have more details on that?
No, I don't have details, but I cannot like I can imagine that the person who saw both like wars or like during her lifespan, during her lifetime, and she knows what's going next after the war because she saw it already after the Second World War.
Very.
So she knows what to expect, and she voluntarily chooses to walk like 6 miles, like on foot, like out of the not just mass poverty, but out of the like danger,
Yeah.
because it's not about like wealth; it's about danger for everyone around.
About, I mean, she's 98. So I mean, this person was born in
20,
1925 or 1926.
yeah.
So she saw the worst of the worst that I think a lot of the worst arguably that happened in Ukraine with the Stalin 5-year plan. Well, maybe not. She was probably already a young child by the time that the 5-year plans are really up and running, as well as the what's the Roskurkulanya in English again? The dekulakization of Ukraine.
Well,
They kill all the kulaks. Oh, what? Am I
yeah,
missing?
but that was in 20s. So
Oh, that was
she was just born in 20s, right? So as a child, she might remember if she's originally from Donetsk region. She must remember that famine of 30s in Ukraine.
a lot more. So,
Yes, exactly.
and then the Holodomor. Yeah, I somehow get the 5-year plans confused with the uh,
Collectivization.
decolonization. Yes, in terms of.
Oh, okay.
So it's
Yeah.
my apologies. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, so she saw the Holodomor then with her own eyes, which was Stalin's systematized extermination of millions of Ukrainians. It was like what, 6 to 8 million Ukrainians?
No, no, no. We have never had that. Like,
An actual
it's like
estimate.
that was estimate the number like 6 mil. Yeah, 6 to 8. But no, like apparently we believe that was around 6 because but some people say it was like 4, like 6, 8, even 10 sometimes.
Right. So let's call it a happy medium of 6 million dead Ukrainians for no reason. Completely artificial famine. And this was, wouldn't you know it, after wiping out all these Ukrainians in the kulaks, which were the Ukrainian farmer class, then a bunch of Russian speakers get imported in, artificially into Ukraine, and 100 years later, this becomes justification for a two ground invasions. But that's a whole different story.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, the second version of this story is a dude with literally no legs. He just also decides that he's sick of this shit, and he's got above the knee amputation, or he just doesn't have them. I'm not sure what his case was, but gentleman with no knees does his best to make his way again out of occupied territory, makes it a kilometer, which for a man with no legs is extremely impressive. And he's also picked up by the Ukrainians. So for this is the reason I include this is A, because it's a nice story. It's nice to hear uh, people getting out. And B, because I think it is very demonstrative of the Ukrainian will and just the balls these people have. I mean, my Christ, this one was 98 years old. She looks out the window one day after years of shelling and explosions. She's like, I'm just sick of this shit. She picks up and just starts walking. Same thing with the dude with no legs. Um, and the third thing is to kind of counter the idiots on the internet to say like, oh, Russian occupation, it's a dream. You're not being persecuted by the Ukrainian Nazi government. We're all living so happy and free under Russia. No, that's all complete bullshit. It's a horrible hellscape devoid of any resources or infrastructure or social services of any kind. These people are trapped. And as you can see, at the age of 98 years old, or even just without legs, people are doing whatever they can to get the hell out and wait for liberation. So, you know more about this than I do.
Yeah, this becomes more and more vivid because like no one, probably not many people, let's say, consider France as a some power on European continent because of the jokes and the like weak places on their like in their border for the both world wars. But now his voice is raising and he's saying that he like what was that like he confirms or reaffirms that he is ready to send French troops to Ukraine territory if he gets like a request for that, right? So also what he's talking about, what Macron is talking about, is he's ready to send a French foreign legion to Ukrainian territory, and he's not saying about saying it like to the like war zone or something, but they can like um, take the functions of military functions like on the territory where we have no active war, so they can help us that. And the fun fact that the commander of French Foreign Legion at the moment is like Kirill Yushchenko, so a general with Ukrainian origins.
Oh man, this is deeper than I thought. Um, yeah, it's weird and confusing to me because Macron went through so many subsequent clown phases at the beginning of the conflict. There were the Macron memes of him
Yes.
saying like Ukraine needs to give up territory and Ukraine needs to make peace concessions, and the internet was covered in memes of him like with his face in his hands, kind of like the 2023-24 realpolitik equivalent of the Keanu Reeves sad meme, when it's like, man, when you can't, with the caption being like Macron sad because, he can't actually surrender for another person's country. But yeah, I saw just some bits from what he was saying. Very fiery rhetoric, right? Very Eurocentric rhetoric, which is also important because the Europeans, being a collection of snooty tribes, always forget that the distance from Kharkiv to Przemysl or Lviv is much shorter than they want it to be, and the distance from Przemysl to Germany is much shorter than they want it to be. So him, going out and saying Europe needs to invest in this defense. We need to do it for European reasons to assure the security of Europe. This is a European decision that Europe should be making. Nice to see. The flip side I didn't understand was then sending a fucking envoy to Putin's inauguration, along with uh I don't know how else to say it politely, but meme countries, just countries that are geopolitically a joke and have no presence or influence of any kind. So, or they're Russian puppet states like the Central African Republic or Iran. Not Iran. Iran's not a puppet state, but you know. So
That's great, like question, but like I suspect in this case all this like political confirmation of re-elections of Putin is connected somehow to foreign affairs of the European Union in Africa. So this is the only reason like I can like connect it to.
that would make sense. But thanks to Mira of Kiev for the 2 excellent memes in a row as featured on the slide. I also saw Blade Runner on the plane over to here, so I can finally relate to the face. But all right, and we can move on to. Does that mean you have a point that you need to make, or you're approving the move along?
Like I have mixed feelings about that. So on the one hand, like what is it like T40?
T-34.
I'm so sorry. Like my bad. My bad. My bad.
I had to research it. I had to find the picture. All right. If I'm supplying the photo, I gotta at least know what I'm looking at. I know 2 things about the tank in the picture. Number 1, 3 things about the tank. Pardon me. Number 1, that is a T-34, which is a World War II model tank. Number 2, that is the only tank that was present at the parade. There was some other military gear on display, some just like trucks and things like that, and 1 or 2 ICBMs. But number 3, and most significantly of all, is that if you look at this picture with the bastardized St. George's Nazi stripes on the side with the communist flag coming out the top, we need to point out to you that this tank was made in Kharkiv, Ukraine. Because then, just as now, Russia does not make things that are worth buying. Russia does not make things of quality. So they did have a big military parade on Victory Day on the 9th, as they do. And, that went, Putin got a bunch of his generals up, and maybe situationally, maybe not, situated 2 of them that are responsible for some of the worst human rights violations in Ukraine. So you got like the butcher of Bucha to sit right behind him, the guy that ordered mass execution of civilians in Bucha, and other types to be up in his little stand. And then they had the walking around and things like that. But I'll let you jump in about that. I have a question about the Besmirny Polk later, or maybe we can do that separate.
That's been a nice psyops about this Paul.
Okay.
So about the tank. So like I have very mixed feelings about it, the picture. Because on the one hand, like I would like, as probably most of us, but to believe that this is the only tank that they can show off. Just a checkbox for the parade, and from this perspective, it's a good news. And another sign that it could be just a sign that they're willing not showing whatever they have or whatever they manufactured, and they are keeping everything for the front line to send to. And on the fun part of this picture, it seems to me like it's a big, wink, wink for the next coup d'etat, because the first one organized by Prigozhin wasn't very successful, but this one is like huge, like wink, wink, like guys, we can do this time because that's everything we got here. And you don't even need like any tanks or any vehicles to achieve some like significant progress.
Whoa.
Into the direction of Moscow.
Bro, are you saying this is going to be like a 1991 Boris Yeltsin situation?
I don't know. Whatever I see, because with Prigozhin, they had some like equipment like helicopters and everything. But if it's everything they got right now, so it's gonna be way more entertaining than any Netflix TV show like worldwide we can witness than it was with the first attempt.
Oh, that was insanely entertaining when that was unfolding. But I love that actually. I love that. I'm going to There was a period in time where I was watching so much Twitter associated with that I was like trying to find the people that were reposting from Russian Telegram channels videos of Russian military tech moving on trains. That was like geotech. It's oh, I want. Oh, I hope you're right. As with many things, Artem, my dear friend, I hope you are right. That
Well, unfortunately, these things can like escalate in any direction. So there is like a
I mean,
like huge number of like scenarios that everything can go wrong for both countries, for continents, and for the entire planet. So we don't know that.
you're talking
But
like
the picture is like for the 2024 is more than awkward.
it's more than awkward. That's the professional analysis I'm going to leave it at. But actually, I'm not going to leave it there. I'm going to contribute to the awkwardness. So, for people that are not Russians or shills, the Victory Day parade in Moscow is a huge. I don't want to call it like an equivalent to the State of a Union address, but it is very much like a big Russian celebration honoring Memorial Day of the Russian victory over the Nazis. Because again, Russia's going to call this a Russian victory, not the fact that you know 27 million civilians and military died in the Soviet Union. But they're going to say it was all Russia, it's all Moscow, right? Um, they tend to overlook the fact that people viewing the podcast can see in the bottom right corner, which is when this parade was happening in 1941. The honored guests of this parade were a large contingent of Hitler's best Nazis, because the Ribbentrop Pact was still very much a thing. So it's part of the Russian duality of the narrative. It's part of the spaghetti argument that Miles covered in a previous episode we had. You have to remember that Russia just puts whatever narrative out there it can and it'll stick, right? You might say, why the hell would they have a victory parade to conquer, dedicated to the victory over the Nazis if they align with the Nazis? And the answer to that is because they're not going to say that they align with the Nazis. They're going to have some alternative version of history that justifies that or makes them the victim. So it was never a malicious plan to rip Poland and Central and Eastern Europe apart in two sides. It was a sponsored liberation from some kind of whatever, right? But the Russians did a lot of collaborating with the Nazis back in the late 30s, early 40s. We need to not forget that before the Nazis turned around and flipped them the bird. Also, fun fact about the parade was that quite a few Telegram channels were not Telegram channels, pardon me, TV channels were hacked all across Russia at this time, displaying a wide variety of videos. The one in this slide is a long propaganda video about the two FSB agents that local police in Dagestan found back in 1999 when, who wouldn't you know it, Vladimir Putin rose to his highest level of power where he sat since then. These two FSB agents, as we discussed in a previous episode, planted explosives inside of a residential apartment building, killed about 400 Russians. Putin basically the next day announces that these were Chechen terrorists, Muslim terrorists, right? And then he leads an attack on Chechnya. Hugely successful false flag operation. Hundreds of Russians die. Because again, coming back to the first slide, Russia doesn't give a fuck about his people. And neither should you. That's my Uncle Sam moment for the podcast. I pointed at the camera emphatically. I'll get the screen grab and make sure it comes to the final cut. So, interesting counter psyop. Not sure who it was from. I saw some Telegram Telegram channels that were like Clean Russia or something like that coming out, but I don't know anything about them, so I'm not going to comment. Yes, Russians celebrated their parade that was initially, side by side with the Nazis, and then some hacking occurred that was quite funny. Yes, sir.
So like if we wait a bit longer not for today, but like few days longer, I believe we'll hear very similar news about FSB like exploding like residential buildings in Belgrade, and those are news from today. So we just need to wait a little bit. So because the pattern is very similar.
Okay. All right.
So
That's I hope you're not right in this case, because that'll just boost Russian support. But we shall see. I mean, I would not be surprised. To your point, I would be 0% surprised if it came out tomorrow in the news that hold on, we have to get the demographics right. It is a Ukrainian Nazi ISIS Islamist that is CIA backed and funded on psychotropics that did like a poison or a biological weapons attack in an apartment complex in Belgrade.
yeah, but we need also to add some Zionist
Damn it,
to
right?
the title of
Forgot the Jews.
Nazis.
Forgot the Jews. The Russians are also highly anti-Semitic. And for the people that say, "Oh, there's lots of Russian Jews," it's like they're all Ukrainian Jews. Point number one. Point number two: being Jewish was the biggest ticket out of the Soviet Union. So, I don't think people would be fleeing en masse if they were having a good time. Separate discussion for another time. If you have another opinion, fight me in the comments. I don't care. Unfortunately, we have to come to the most recent news, which is Russia, by all accounts that I'm aware of, and I'm going to leave it at that because I think the nature through which I was hearing some of these accounts is kind of sensitive. And through all reputable accounts, Russia is launching at least a raid on the northern border of the Kharkiv Oblast. So they've taken POWs. I've heard mixed reports of the territorial gains of the Ukrainians are saying that it's, the gray zone is the gray zone. And by gray zone, I mean the no man's land that is the border, which that's just how wars and trench warfare works. You have two dudes, you have guys in trenches poking their heads out with a periscope to see if the other person's moving. And it's very difficult to make territorial gains because everything's mined all to shit and the other person, is constantly monitoring you. So that's the first thing. Second reason I'm disinclined to think the Russians at this stage have taken vast swaths of territories because they're bombing the shit using aviation out of every northernmost village along the Ukrainian, Kharkiv border. So in the right side, you see the village of Vovchansk, for example, basically now a parking lot. What was it? Friday, Saturday, there was a small number of evacuees. And then as the shelling got worse and the aviation, the actual bombing got worse, they got several thousand people out. Right. So if Russia had occupied that territory, there'd be no getting several thousand people out. But in the meantime, Russia is certainly not skipping any opportunity to bomb schools. As you can see in this bottom center there, the headline kind of splotches the blood, but that blood stain is from a small boy whose leg was blown off when the Russians dumped a bomb into a schoolyard. The leftmost one there is from the 5th of May, where the Russians dumped a bomb onto a church during Easter Mass, 15 wounded. And the top center is St. Javelin, which is, making an appropriate mockery of the never again type people in Europe, because Europe needs to get off its ass, just like America, having passed aid, still needs to get more off its ass and allow it to do it. Because if nothing else, this is the biggest piece of evidence that Russia is out to destroy Ukraine, not, economically pressure it, not negotiate with it, not liberate it in any way. So the ruination that you see on the screen for those watching is the liberation that Russia offers, and the type of liberation that 98-year-old woman and legless men flee from with every single tool in their arsenal. And rant. So,
Well, with 98-year-old woman, it's the power of experience. Because the American one from the first slide, he didn't have this experience, so he believed in that BS of Russian propaganda, and he like participated in the war. So because he didn't have this experience, so he believed the media.
Yes. He believed the
So
media
this
that
the
did that
problem.
analysis. Yeah.
He bought it.
Yeah. So if for whatever reason, any alternate universe, Marjorie Taylor Greene or, Kim.com, any of these other people are listening to the podcast, believe the media, go to Russia right now. They will accept you. They will love you. They will house you. They will clothe you. Let us know how that goes. So I can keep that on. That's not an actionable threat. So yeah, but I think it's a very valid point with the experience because I'd like to do an episode at some point about early 20th century Ukraine, but having translated two memoirs, both from people that never learned to write properly, but people that were born in the very early 1920s, so 1900s. So these aren't, these are people that were born in the 19 teens around the time of World War One. Even then, people that were completely uneducated, living in their own village, farming and getting by, once the Nazis came over Ukraine, they were like, that was bad. Once the Red Army was coming back, that's when they fled. They fled the Russians at that stage because they knew to not be around when the Soviet Union came back, the Soviet Union being Moscow, at all costs to avoid that. So, um, the war is still very much going on. Ukraine fatigue might be a thing. Ukraine needs all of the help it can get. Russia is getting a lot of support. The sanctions aren't working because they don't target things correctly, and Russia can still import. Russia has big weapons shipments coming in from North Korea and Iran. They're not going to stop anytime soon. So the only thing you can do with a rabid dog is shoot it. If you're listening, please do whatever you can to contribute any efforts to shoot the rabid dog. Anything else?
Nope.
So, I
Oh,
yeah, I couldn't avoid the Grand Theft Auto meme because wouldn't you know it, there's in countries where the people really want to have a free, liberal democracy, and the leader decides to really get close in ties with Russia by passing legislation that is much more Russia centric and or echoes things that Russia does. And then when the people come out in tens of thousands to protest that, using the power that democracy gives them, the citizens' voice and the right to protest that democracy gives them. Uh, Not surprising that the Russians are using the state. By that I mean the country of Georgia in the Caucasus as another. Oh, there's Nazis here, there's Euro Nazis, blah blah blah. But the reality is the Georgians. Well,
uh, the Georgia looks to me like a pilot version of crimes, actions like psyops. What like will most likely happen to Ukraine with from 6 to 8 years lag. So everything that happens in Georgia, we can expect like in 6 8 years in Ukraine,
uh,
because like the Wikipedia says that 20 up to 20% of Georgia is occupied by Russia right now. So it's not like Russia. Those are not like any people republic. Those are just occupied territories. So, and the country is small itself. And what actually saved the Georgia in 2008 after the Olympic Games in Beijing, that was the call of George Bush Jr. to Kremlin, because Russians was 60 kilometers far from the capital of the country back then.
mhm.
So, and now we see Georgia as an independent state only because only thanks to that call. But now Georgia has pro-Russian government. Georgia is copying all this authoritarian or totalitarian like laws, just like the carbon copy of Russian like legislation, just to like mm, force people not to work with any Western organizations. And what we see like right now, how Georgia becomes Yeah, I don't know how to put it. What we see, like the Georgia tries to like scream to the world that they need help, but world is not like well enough organized to provide help to Georgia at the moment.
Yes.
That's how I see it, unfortunately. And like having ongoing war in like Ukraine, Georgia also has like not ongoing but sort of frozen conflict at the moment. So the picture is not very uh, optimistic for
I
me.
mean, the will of the people at least is there. So this is not a, you know, the Euromaidan, the second Euromaidan, the one Americans know about. As soon as the bill was pulled by Yanukovych, you guys came out in the streets. As soon as this thing started hitting tables in Georgian government, the people came out in the streets. And to clarify for people listening, the foreign influence bill that the Georgians are protesting would require certain declarations for anybody, any organization, and I believe if any organization receives more than 20% of its funding from a non-Georgian or certain designated Western sources, they must be classified as a foreign agent, which that's the part where, you want to work for a European newspaper, you're now classified as a foreign agent. You're receiving your money from foreign agents. And Russia used that as an instrument of suppressing non-Russian voices within Russia and suppressing non-Russian information sources within Russia. So very easy, it's a very short step from calling everybody Western a foreign agent and having complete control over the information space in your country. And if a pro-Russian government in Georgia would have complete control over the information space in Georgia, that's going to become very bad. So, uh, but I would expect to see in the news Russia saying the same things about this that they said about the second Euromaidan. I would expect the Russian agitators to come in and be screwing things up. Um, but the people are protesting en masse every day for weeks, and I've seen almost no coverage of this in Western media. Everything that I open in America has been concerned about Donald Trump's court cases and/or votes, and Biden trying to figure out Rafa. So this is something that needs to be talked about because the Georgians are desperately owed help. Uh, Hopefully, Ukraine will not become a clone, but time will tell.
Oh well, we like from this moment, I believe because of the ongoing war, we can like if Ukraine survives, it will be very different because Ukraine has a bit like better position and a bit more attention than Georgia.
Good.
But the point of saying that that something has been done, must be done, and the point is like why Georgia is important because it's one of not many post-Soviet countries like who that built a real democracy. Of course, it's like with all the problems like corruption, etc., everything we don't like, but only three countries, if we exclude Baltics,
Yeah.
are democratic countries where like after something is going wrong, but the streets speak out
Yeah.
loud as possible. So it's Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia.
Yes.
Only three. That's why Georgia is so important.
That's an excellent point. Actually, I didn't think of that. Belarus had potential for a short time, but
They had, but probably after the protests of 2020, that big protest that they had in Minsk, they like I see it as they learned a lot from Ukrainian protests.
okay.
That's why one of the reasons why the protest wasn't successful.
They being the Russian powers and the corrupt Belarusian powers that be. Yeah. Well, yeah. I never thought about that in that specific post-Soviet series or perspective. But again, so that the audience is aware when you're thinking about, and I'm not going to provide a cultural disclaimer here. When you talk about the stands largely referred to, There's a reason that they're often referred to as memes because they're largely guided by autocratic rulers, very much at the expense of the people. So I actually would either read about on your own, or John Oliver does a great episode on the president of Turkmenistan, who like Archer had a grid parody where he like renamed the days of the week and named one of the days in honor of his dog. So yeah, it's just a clown world outside of Georgia and Ukraine and Moldova. But it's hard to look at this, not do the whole GTA reprisal.
Yeah.
Like, ah, shit, here we go again. Right. That's all I got. You got anything else to add?
No, nothing's here.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.